podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice. Because every situation is unique, you should consult with a qualified legal professional for advice specific to your circumstances. If you need legal guidance, please reach out to an accredited attorney or contact us to schedule a consultation. Hello, and welcome back to our Veteran Benefits Podcast. This is your host, Rebecca Deming. Today, we have one of our very own attorneys from ProVet Legal joining us, Sarah Brock, and we are going to be talking about C&P exams, compensation and pension exams. So, Sarah, before we dive into the subject matter, can you take a minute and introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Rebecca said, Sarah Brock, I am from New Orleans. I have to give a throw out or a shout out. Go Tigers. If you're a Saints fan, I love that too. So I went to LSU for undergrad and then Loyola College of Law, University of New Orleans for law school. My husband is active duty Navy and has been for about 6 or 7 years now. So we've moved all the way from Jacksonville to Pensacola and pretty much made every stop in between. And now we are permanently stationed, hopefully for the foreseeable future, in Virginia Beach. And so far, we're loving it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sarah. Thanks for joining us. We get a lot of questions about compensation and pension exams, as you know, from our clients, from our viewers, what they are, why they have to go to so many, why they have to keep going back afterwards.
Thanks.
So hopefully we can kind of answer a lot of those questions here. And then for you viewing audience, if you have more questions, if we piqued your interest and we didn't get to your specific question, please put it in the comments and we will do our best to either answer it in the comments or maybe even film another episode that answers your questions. So, Sarah, why do veterans often feel like they're being sent to C&P exams over and over again?
It's a really good question. And it's, like Rebecca said, probably the number one question we get is, didn't I just go to a CNP exam? Why am I going again? Is it for the same condition? And to answer that question, you kind of have to take a little bit of a step back and understand what a CNP exam is and what is the purpose. And so a CNP exam, it's an exam that VA is going to send you to with the intent to help you develop your claim. I do believe VA has the best intent at heart, but a lot of times VA has just grown so big since it became the Veterans Benefits Administration, the VBA. And I don't think there's bad intent, but there's a lot of employees that just don't have a whole lot of training, that still need more development on what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to develop your claim. And so one answer is, the employee that put in the exam request maybe didn't make it quite correct. Maybe it left out a condition that was supposed to be ordered. Maybe they only ordered the symptom DBQ form. They didn't ask for the opinion. And so now you have to go back for another exam to get the opinion. And that's just one reason, is sometimes there really isn't a rhyme or reason behind it, kind of beyond, maybe lack of training on how to do those exam requests. Another reason is, I'm sure everyone is very familiar with the PACT Act, TARA. And if not, maybe do some research, a little bit of research on PACT Act and TARA, and there might be a podcast about that as well that you can listen to.
So, Sarah, what is TARA for people who are listening in?
So TARA is Toxic Exposure Risk Activity, TERA. We call it TARA. And what the PACT Act, which the PACT Act really expanded a lot of the conditions and locations that are now presumptive, meaning if you served in a location at a specific time and you have a certain condition, VA is going to concede that it's service connected, that it's related to service. Well, within that legislation, it also expanded on what else is toxic in the military. As we know, TARA, Toxic Exposure Risk Activity. And so with that, it can be firefighting foam, it can be military cleaning products, it can be a whole host of things. And so there is now all of this fallout from that legislation, again, probably good intent, just not implemented the best way, where these VA employees are requesting TARA opinions on everything. Was your PTSD caused by TARA? Was your back caused by TARA? Was your ankle condition caused by TARA? The answer is probably no. But with their guidelines, they do have to get those exams and those opinions. And so sometimes that's where multiple exam requests can come in. And it's really frustrating. It's kind of just a part of the game.
So, Sarah, you're talking about the exam requests. And so maybe if we can kind of back it up and like reverse engineer it for people, what who puts together the exam request, who receives the exam request, how is the exam request form written, or like why might there be a separate exam request for Tara? If it's your knee condition, like why does it matter if Tara is involved?
Yeah, so kind of to take a step back. So the exam requests, right? Whenever you submit a new application on the 526 easy form, if you do a supplemental claim form, if you've done an HLR and now you have a duty to assist error, which stems from an HLR appeal, typically it's going to go to an evidence development team. And there's hundreds, maybe thousands of development teams, pockets within VA all over. And that team is going to say, what did you claim? So I think PTSD is probably the one that most people have questions about. Most veterans are claiming it. So PTSD or any mental health condition, let's say you file for that on one of those forms that I mentioned or one of those mechanisms. It's going to go to the evidence review team and they're going to say, what has the veteran submitted for us to review? What evidence did they give us? And then what evidence do we need to develop? And sometimes the evidence that they need to develop, it could be a checkbox form that, VA has said you need to develop these pieces of evidence in order to decide this claim. And so sometimes they're just simply going through their forms. On one of those forms on their checkboxes, it might say you need to order an exam, a compensation and pension exam, CNP exam, for to determine whether there's a medical nexus, whether there's first a current condition, and then whether that condition is related to something that happened in service. And so that's where those exams are going to come in. And in order to order those exams, they have to write an exam request form. And it basically is telling the medical examiner what they need to do, what exams are being ordered. So is it the CNP opinion? Is it just going to be the disability benefits questionnaire form, which is going to just look at your symptoms? What exactly are they ordering? And then they're going to go through and say, we want you to give an opinion on Tara, the toxic exposure. Was PTSD caused by toxic exposure? And, those mechanisms are going to trigger the examiner to give an opinion. So I know this is probably a little cart before the horse, but a lot of veterans will also say, my CNP examiner said that if I upload this document or lay statement, it will help prove something that they weren't assigned to answer. And that can be really frustrating as well because the examiner is kind of stepping into a little bit of a legal atmosphere. And maybe they don't know really what the theory of the case is. So again, lots of CNP exams for lots of different reasons, likely with good intent behind a lot of them.
So the person requesting the CMP exam is not saying, hey, is PTSD service connected? They're asking a more specific question, right? Like, is it connected to toxic exposure? Is it
Yes.
is the PTSD caused because of your back injury that's causing depression? Is the PTSD caused by the rocket propelled grenade that hit your base when you were in Afghanistan? Or
Yep.
so so if the examiner then so let's say that our theory of the case, we've talked to the veteran, and our theory of the case is that the veteran has PTSD and it's because their base was attacked in Afghanistan. And VA asked the question, was the PTSD caused by toxic exposure risk activity? How might would something like that unfold? Have you seen stuff like that? And what can a veteran do? What would we do as representatives in that kind of situation?
Yeah. So the frustrating answer is that yes, it happens. It probably happens more often than we would like to see. I don't think that the Terra stuff comes in as much with mental health. I think VA gets that. VA is pretty clear. When it's an orthopedic condition, though, the gloves are off. You're going to get a Terra opinion probably whether you want it or not. And especially when we're talking about sleep apnea, migraines, very high chance you're going to get a Terra opinion. But so if we're looking at the PTSD one, and let's say, for example, VA does order the Terra opinion for mental health, and you know that that's not your theory. You go to this CNP exam, you take, either time off work or time out of your day to go to this exam in person, and you think you're going to, put your best foot forwards, tell them your story, kind of have your your 15 minutes to really, convince this CNP examiner. And maybe they're saying, well, tell me about what toxic exposure, you were exposed to in the military. And you're like, that's not what I'm asking. And so sometimes that can be your tip off that they don't have the right question in front of them to ask you. And they can't do anything about it. They can't go rogue and answer their own opinion. And so from the veteran perspective, if you don't have a representative, the best thing you can do is call VA, explain the situation, and they're gonna, again, VA loves their form. So VA is gonna do a form, explain what you spoke about. Hopefully, whenever the claim goes to the rating team, they're gonna review that. There's a high chance that they won't, but your hope is that they will. The other thing that you can do is a lay statement. So write out what happened at the CNP exam, where the line of questioning maybe was, not with the theory that you presented, maybe direct service connection. And again, your hope is that the rating team will catch that and review it and maybe order a new CNP exam. So again, that's where a new one could come in. If you have a representative, things are a little bit different because we get direct access into VA's system. And so we can kind of have a different line of attack on contacting directly or contacting the employee that wrote the exam request and say, hey, I think we're misaligned with what the theory of the case is. Can we take a step back? Can we pivot? Can we get a new exam request written for the correct theory so that the veteran's not wasting their time and energy and mental space on going to a CNP exam that frankly isn't going to help the case. So again, it's a little bit different from when you have a representative versus if you're, working the case as a veteran, but the end result is still the same, that sometimes you're going to have multiple exams.
So if you get an exam that answers the wrong question, can VA make a decision based on that exam?
Can VA? Yes.
I guess I'm setting you a
Should
trap,
VA?
Sarah.
So, short answer, can VA do it? Yes. VA likes to do a lot of things that technically they should not do. And again, I really do believe that the employees that work at VA do have the right intent behind it. Just some of the tools are missing. Should VA make that decision based on the wrong theory of entitlement? No. And so when you fill out your, initial application, your 526, or your supplemental claim, or your higher level review, again, whatever mechanism you're using, you do want to put in what theory you're asking for. So if you're saying that your PTSD was directly caused by service, say that. If you're saying that your PTSD was directly caused by your service connected knee condition, which would be a secondary claim, say that. And that will then help the rating team look at what you initially filed, what theory you claimed, and then they can kind of overlay it with the opinion they got. I do think VA is pretty good about seeing when they got the wrong opinion. And again, chances are they're just going to get both.
Can you talk a little bit about obesity as an intermediary cause on CMP exams and what we're seeing when that's the theory of service connection?
Yeah, it's just going to go a little crazy. So, obesity is an intermediate step. It is a very expanding area of law. There's a new case that came out saying that obesity can technically be a condition. We still really haven't seen how it works in practice. So I don't think your best bet is probably going to be to file a claim for obesity. But the better way that we've seen it, the better angle that we typically use it is to use it kind of as a stepping stone. So let's use PTSD, for example. If you have PTSD and, exercise is just mentally tough on you, you're not able to get out and work out and exercise, and maybe a part of your mental health condition is that you're overeating. Naturally, you are going to gain weight. And this is a very common theory. A lot of veterans experience this. That obesity that you're now experiencing that you didn't have before you had PTSD is linked again to your PTSD. So your PTSD caused the obesity. This is where the stepping stone comes in, because now you can say that obesity is causing certain conditions. Typically, we're seeing sleep apnea. Sometimes we're even seeing orthopedic conditions where the extra weight is causing your joints and ligaments to break down. VA is going to get very confused, right? Whenever you ask VA to go on a stepping stone adventure with you, they're going to get lost along the way. They do have very strict guidelines on how they're supposed to work obesity as an intermediate step opinions. Chances are it's going to go a little haywire somewhere along the way. And so I will say, I do see, at least with the veterans that we represent, I see a lot of veterans have multiple exams when there's obesity as an intermediate step. And I really do believe it's because the employees that are doing the exam requests and reviewing them are either requesting them a little bit incorrectly and they're getting the wrong answers, or it's not considering the things that they're supposed to consider. And so they kind of keep going in the spin cycle of getting new opinions to try and answer the right question.
I mean, I definitely think we've seen exams where maybe the question wasn't worded correctly and the examiner
Yeah.
either intentionally or stubbornly or unintentionally, whatever, answered literally and said, well, no, your knee condition didn't cause your sleep apnea because knees are not part of the respiratory system. And so therefore they cannot cause respiratory disorders. And you're just like, wait a minute, that was like, we never said that the knee directly caused the sleep apnea. We said the knee caused them to gain weight because they couldn't work out, or, or the PTSD caused them to gain weight and they couldn't work out, or whatever it was. And that's, and if they're not asked the right question, sometimes I feel like it's like, see no evil, hear no evil, like la 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 la, like you didn't ask me that question, I can't answer it. And I don't know all the contract mechanisms in like when VA asks them to answer a question. I mean, they might be getting in trouble if they
I
answer
wouldn't
the
be
question that they're
surprised.
intuiting should be asked.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, right, everything comes down to money with government organizations and most of, the world. And so it's like, I'm only getting paid for this one question that you asked me. If you want me to answer another question, you know, cough up the dough for that one. So it's tricky.
Yeah. So I know a lot of veterans will get private medical opinions either from their treating doctors, or they'll hire a private nexus company to review their records and write an opinion. If you have a private opinion, can VA still request a CMP exam?
Yes, they can. And they probably will, if I'm being truthful. Although recently we have kind of seen a mixed bag where we are putting very explicit language on the form to say you don't need another CNP opinion. This opinion is sufficient for rating purposes for X, Y, and Z reasons. And so we're really trying to lay it out as clear as possible so that when VA processes the claim, they are not requesting unnecessary opinions. Again, it's VA. VA can do whatever it would like. And so a lot of times you will see new CNP opinions be ordered. Don't be fearful of it. Again, when it's a complex theory, when you've probably already been denied, you have your medical opinion that you paid your hard earned money for. It can be frustrating when you see another denial. Typically, when VA gets that new CNP opinion, it's probably going to be negative. And again, it's nothing that you've done wrong. You haven't presented your case incorrectly, most likely. It's just CMP examiners, they don't have the time or bandwidth to do the deep dive into the medical literature that they need to. And it's really frustrating because it is supposed to be a veteran friendly system. And that's why the CMP opinions and the CMP examiners are there. And so it can feel a little bit like you're butting heads with the system that's designed to help you because of the CMP examiners. But yes, you're probably going to have a CNP exam ordered. And whether it's an ACE review, which an ACE review is a record review only, I try and ask for those as much as we can, especially for veterans with severe mental health or severe orthopedic conditions, especially when it's a case where the veteran doesn't need to go. Like, we don't need the opinion in the first place. Please don't waste the veteran's time going to this exam that you don't need to get anyways. But if you get a denial, just know that it's probably stemming from that bad CMP opinion, and they're not necessarily always discrediting your private medical opinion. Sometimes they just haven't even looked at it or acknowledged it. And so then that comes, other appeal mechanisms that you should continue to go down. Don't ever let VA, you know, wipe you out and deny your claim and send you on your way. Keep fighting, and there's always appeal options that you can use.
So if you have your own medical opinion, or if you've been to a CMP exam and you're like, hey, I did that, I don't want to go to another one, and you just refuse to go to, VA ordered you to go to one and you just refuse to go to that. I've seen conflicting evidence or conflicting guidance online where some people will say, never go to another, you have your own evidence, never go. Some say, always go, or they're definitely going to deny you. Can you kind of walk us through how to, how to make that decision and how to address those conflicting guidance online?
Yeah, there's a lot of veterans out there and they're all going to have their own experiences. It's very rare that one veteran is going to post on Facebook and that's going to be the norm for everyone. Sometimes that veteran's case could be a one-off or it could follow the trend. So I do always caution, our clients and other veterans from exclusively listening to the advice they hear on Reddit or Facebook or things like that. Use it as more of a learning tool on how you can handle your own case.
If VA tells you to go to an exam,
Yes,
but you already have enough evidence and you think you already have enough evidence in the record, you have a private opinion or you have a CMP exam that you liked, and you
yes,
and you decide not to go, is that
yeah.
the death sentence for your your claim, or can you decide not to go? Can you tell them to pound sand?
So again, you can tell VA you don't want to go to the exam. And we put it on most of our forms whenever we submit the private medical opinions and say the veteran's not going to attend. We don't think the veteran needs to attend. Realistically, if you don't attend, if you do a no-show or if you call the CNP exam company and say, I'm not coming, it's going to be flagged no-show. It's going to immediately be routed to the rating team. You have a high chance of getting denied. It's in VA has this internal manual, the M21 manual, which basically is just case law and legislation pushed down in a condensed version for raters and VA employees to use. There are some areas in the M21 that does say if you don't go to the exam, VA does have grounds to deny you. And it's really frustrating. Again, it kind of feels like a waste of government resources, a waste of your time to go to this exam when you don't need it. Um, but if you want the strongest chance of success, I typically recommend going. I think there's exceptions, right? If you've kind of been in the spin cycle of going to exams, getting denied, you give your private medical opinion, you get a CMP exam, you get denied, and you're like, I can't do it. I'm okay with the denial. I know it's going to come. I'm going to, do another appeal mechanism, go to the board, higher level review, whatever you're going to do. Then and I never say don't go, but I think that at that point it could be a consideration as long as you know what to expect. We do have a lot of veterans that are pretty mentally disabled, physically disabled, cancer patients. And for them, it's just not feasible. And I say, look, if you're okay with getting that denial, don't go, right? Just save your mental energy, save your resources for something that's a little bit more important, and just don't go as long as you're okay with the outcome. So I think it's just managing your own expectations. Again, if your buddies in the same situation, manage their expectations because VA can deny you.
Can you talk us through a little bit the development with the intent to deny, and when we might push back if we think VA is developing something, you got a favorable CMP opinion and they're developing for another CMP opinion to try to trick the examiner into changing their mind and saying something negative. Can you talk us through how that might play out?
Yeah. So all too often, we'll see a favorable CMP opinion come through, and we do share that with the clients reluctantly, right? We say, hey, look, this isn't final. This is not a decision. It is a good CMP opinion. It is VA. There is always room for that to change. And so again, just expectation management with VA, I think is super important. But so when we have those conversations and we see a favorable CMP opinion, and then maybe a week later, we see a new exam request for that condition, we typically know something funky is going on, unless it was Tara and, some other reason. But if it was the correct theory, good opinion, based on medical literature, rationale, and then we see a new exam request, that is kind of where our spidey senses kick in and say, VA is trying to do something funky. Whether it's intentional or not, we'll never know. But they will often say, can you give me an addendum opinion considering XYZ, right? And they're going to write out where they think, where they believe the initial opinion was insufficient. And they're going to say, can you give me this new opinion based on these insufficiencies that I believe exist in your opinion? More often than not, the CNP examiners, they just don't know enough about the legal side that I often see them say, Dear VA, we're so sorry, we were wrong. Here's this negative opinion. And then VA is going to use that and say, great, now you can deny the claim. Those are the times where you get up and you bang your head against the wall, and then you sit back down and you say, okay, what are we going to do about it? Because those are really frustrating. And so, again, that's a time where if you have a representative, they can see the exam request initially and try and stop it, try and say, hey, what are you doing? Where are the insufficiencies? Here's what the M21 says. Again, try and point them in the right direction that you don't need a new exam, that the original opinion is correct. If you are an unrepresented veteran, that might be the time to call into VA, write a statement to VA. You could decline the second exam. Typically, those second exams aren't going to call you in person. They're going to be record review only. So they're going to happen whether you accept or decline anyways. So yeah, I mean, it's just the unfortunate part of VA. It's really frustrating. But if you have a representative, sometimes they can get in there a little bit early, maybe work a little bit of magic and try and point VA in the right direction that you don't need a new exam.
Do you ever see VA request an addendum opinion after a negative opinion, like, hey, examiner, think again, maybe we can connect this? Or
Rarely. Maybe I can count on one hand in my entire career. I think with mental health, you will see it more often because, you know, verification stressors, in-service events, a lot of times the development team will say, Dear National Archive Center, can you verify whether this event occurred or not? And so sometimes, if they get a response back from the National Archive Center that's favorable, and you previously had a negative opinion, sometimes they'll say, all right, well, wait, we just got this new evidence. Let's get another one. But it's rare. VA usually hooks onto those negative opinions and pushes out a decision pretty quick.
yeah, unfortunately,
Yeah.
it seems like they do more of the rework. Not exclusively, but it seems like they do more of the rework when you think stuff is going in the right direction. They're like, well, we've got to verify, double check that, get another opinion on it, and yeah, that can definitely be problematic. Okay, so Sarah, you were talking about if the examiner writes this, you can reach out to VA. So I mean, kind of indirectly, you you were talking about, like, it's like this triad of communication. Like, VA requests the exam, you as the veteran go and you talk to the examiner, and then if you're not happy with how that went, you talk to the examiner. So can you talk a little bit about the role, or you talk to VA, not to the examiner. So can you talk a little bit about the role of the examiner, and are they the ones that make the decision in the end? Are they the ones that can say, like, yes, I'm granting you this disability?
Yeah. It can feel like the CNP examiner has the final say. And sometimes whatever the CNP examiner says or what opinion they give, VA is usually going to sink their teeth into it and use that as a basis for a denial. But if we're looking at it from very like, what is VA supposed to do? What is VA's lane? What is the CNP examiner's lane? Then they're all supposed to be very separate. So, the CNP examiner is just there as a third party, uninterested, unbiased medical examiner, or a medical physician, and they could be physician's assistant, nurse practitioner, doctor, really kind of anywhere on that sliding scale. And they really are just tasked and paid to give an opinion and evaluate the veteran. We don't know what internal guidance they get because it always does feel very copy and paste. It was done very quickly. Again, you have some really great CNP examiners out there. You have some really bad CNP examiners out there. It's kind of like a sliding scale. Most are going to fall in the middle to bad, but there are some really great ones. So if you get a great one and you have a great experience, you are very lucky. But so, once they give their opinion, they are done with the case. They kind of wipe their hands and they're like, okay, like that's it. That's all I was paid to do. And they kick that opinion and exam and all those results back to VA. Then it is now in VA's realm to review the evidence, review the opinion, And again, when I say review the evidence, they're supposed to review all of the evidence. So whatever evidence you submitted, your doctor submitted, friends submitted, whoever, they're supposed to review all of it. Whether they do or not, again, it's a mixed bag, but typically they're always going to review the CNP opinion. And I think it's really just because that's what they are trained to read. So they're not trained to read lay statements as well, private medical opinions, buddy statements, but they know how to read the VA opinions. And so typically a decision is going to stem directly from that. So it can feel like the examiner is making the final decision, but they're really not. They are just being, their opinion is being used for the decision.
I know we've seen it, I think it's rare, but we've seen a few times where without an appeal, you've got a negative CMP opinion and you've got a favorable private opinion, and the rater looks at those and weighs them correctly, in our opinion, and gives more weight to the private opinion. But I think more often than not, we're kind of building the record in preparation for an appeal because the first rater who's looking at that tends to skew towards the CMP examiner's opinion.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, again, it's kind of a mixed bag. There's never going to be a one size fits all. I think when we submit a private medical opinion and it goes to the CNP examiner, typically they're going to review that private medical opinion and they're going to kind of see how dense and stacked and sufficient it is. They know that their copy and paste two little sentences aren't really going to hold up. So we do see a couple more favorable medical opinions that stem from that situation, but again, it's just as long as the CNP examiner is reading it and is looking at the record, and sometimes that doesn't happen, but sometimes it does.
Okay. Turning the subject a little bit, what if you wanted to go to the CMP exam? Like you're not telling VA pound sand, but something comes up and you messed up your calendar and you didn't show up, your boss wouldn't let you off work, you got in a car accident on the way to the CMP exam, you miss your CMP exam. What can you do? What can happen? What would be your recommendation if someone missed the exam?
In short, call everyone. And when I say call everyone, I mean call the CNP exam companies. So whether it's, OptumServe, LHI, QTC, VES, whichever one, call them, let them know the situation. Again, very mixed bag. Sometimes the representative will say, oh my goodness, thank you so much for calling. We have this one small window that we can change the exam to. Can you come in tomorrow or whenever? And it'll work out and it'll be perfect. The more likely conversation you're going to have with that CNP exam company is I don't have the authority to move your exam. I'm going to have to mark you a no-show. And that's going to be really frustrating. Just know that it's not them working with bad intent. It's just they're very strict guidelines that they have to work on and they can't deviate from it. So I always say call the CNP exam company first, just see what they're able to do, if anything, and then call VA. And like I said, VA, whenever you call in, they're going to have a form. It's, going to explain what you called about. And sometimes, again, there's never one size fits all. I hope if there's one takeaway, that is it. But call into VA, they're going to make their form and explain the situation. Say, I couldn't go to the CNP exam. I got in a car accident on the way or I'm out of the country, whatever the situation is, and ask to have your exam moved. Sometimes I think VA really does try. I think if you give a valid reason very quickly, if it's like the same day, next day, maybe even on that second or third day, and you call in and explain the situation, I think you might have good success getting a new exam ordered. Typically, it's not just going to be a rescheduling of that first exam. That first exam is going to be considered a no-show and it's going to get canceled. They're going to issue another exam request, which could be with a different company, could be with a different provider, to hopefully accommodate your rescheduling. So call everybody, call a CNP exam, call VA. And if you do have a representative, do those things as well. Let your representative know I couldn't go to the CNP exam for X, Y, and Z reasons. They may want to develop a lay witness statement with you, submit that to VA, reach out to whoever is working the claim at the moment and say, here's what the situation is. Can we get a new exam request ordered? But on the flip side, right, if you just don't show up, even if you had a very valid reasoning, but if you never let anyone know, expect a denial. Because again, it's going to fall back into that loop of you were a no-show, there's valid reasoning to deny you. And that doesn't mean to say that once that denial comes out, you can do a supplemental claim appeal or another appeal mechanism, whatever you choose, explaining why you couldn't go and asking for a new exam. So there's always appeal options, there's always mechanisms, but it's not a very quick system, and CNPs, as frustrating as they can be, they are a very important mechanism overall. So, if you can attend, we typically recommend it.
Yeah, if it's like it's a frustrating game, but if you want to make your own rules and not play by the rules, then like that's okay. We can still maybe win your case, but we're gonna have to go the long route to get there and add extra appeals. And yeah, yeah, that was gonna be my next question: is what happens if VA makes a decision before you tell everybody why you missed the exam? Okay, Sarah, can you attend the CMP exam with your clients?
I
Can as
cannot.
a veteran can you tap your representative in to like make sure that you're not saying something stupid or saying something you're not supposed to say in the exam?
No, we cannot. So, CNP exams are a personal thing. They are your personal symptoms, personal stories. They are yours to share. They are not ours to share. They are not experiences that we lived through and we currently experience. And so, really, there wouldn't be any benefit for me going to the CNP exam and saying, Mr. Veteran Smith, was in an IED attack and this is what happened. It's going to come better from you. You can bring someone in your support system, whether it's a spouse, a friend, service dog, whoever is in your support system. And VA and the CMP examiners are what we found, they're pretty generous to let your support system in, especially if it's a mental health condition. They understand that those are sensitive conversations. And so sometimes, if your spouse is just sitting in there holding your hand, or if you're getting emotional trying to explain your story, then it's okay if your spouse steps in and says, this is what he's trying to say. And I think that's okay. But no, representatives are not allowed to go to the CMP exams with you. Um, and I think it's for good reason.
Well, Sarah, if you can't go with them, can you give them a cheat sheet of exactly what to say?
No.
Mhm.
And so ethically, right? If anyone out there is saying, here's a cheat sheet, go to here is your itinerary, go to the exam, and here's what to say. Ethically, that's just not okay. And you should be a little bit reluctant because fraud, right? So you can't tell someone else's story. You can't exaggerate the truth. And so do be reluctant if someone does say, oh, well, I went to my CNP exam and I told them XYZ, so you should do the same. Take a step back and say, well, that's not my truth. That's not my story. I will tell my story how I see fit. And again, I think when a CNP examiner sees a very genuine, truthful veteran, they do want to help. Sometimes they just don't know how. And so it's going to go a long way. It's going to go a lot further than if you show up, you know, seeming like you're trying to game the system. Because I think their spidey senses do go up on that as well. But we can tell you what to expect. We can say, here's generally the CNP process, and here's what it's going to look like. And if you show up at some, random storefront and it says the CNP exams in the back, that's kind of normal. Go to it, and we'll walk you through it. So we're not going to coach you, but we're going to walk you through what to expect. And if you have concerns on, well, how do I answer when they ask me about my in-service event? We can kind of walk through, well, here's what we understand your in-service event to be. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, well, here's how you want to present it, so that they understand what you're saying. And again, I think it goes a lot further. So we don't coach you, but we do explain and manage, what to expect.
I think one thing that veterans should understand, it's kind of it's a fine line, but how does VA rate that condition? So what symptoms are they looking for to say that your migraines are 30% versus 50%? And it's not like magic language, right? Like, I mean, if you're repeating the magic language, then VA knows that you were coached and they're going to ask questions. But if you don't understand how they rate it and you're just kind of harping on one set of symptoms, like my headaches hurt a lot, no, like a lot, like it's like a 12 out of 10. Like, okay, well, the pain scale isn't what VA uses to rate migraines. So knowing like how to describe the frequency and the severity and the impact on your life when you have those migraine attacks is going to help you describe your actual truthful symptoms in a way that's
Mhm.
going to help VA give you the right rating. So we can kind of walk you through that piece, but it's not saying, hey, use these magic words, right? When you say we don't coach you, it's like, well, we don't put words in your mouth, but there is definitely
Yeah.
preparation that can be done for exams.
Yeah. I mean, I think migraine is probably the hardest. It's weird, prostrating attacks. Like no one goes around and says, "Hey, boss, I'm having a prostrating attack today for my migraine." It's just not a normal way to speak. You just say my head's really hurting, it's pounding, I'm having auras, whatever you're going through. And so, the CNP examiners at the end of the day, they are trained medical professionals. Like I said, there's always a sliding scale, but they did go to school. They did go to PA school or, medical school or nurse practitioner. So they are supposed to know how to interpret your words and kind of line them up with the VA diagnostic codes.
What are the biggest misconceptions that veterans have about CMP exams?
Gosh, I think the biggest one is VA to give me. I think that's the one that most veterans will call in and say, Sarah, they just said a new CNP exam. Is VA trying to take away my benefits? My typical answer, and some veterans like it, some veterans probably get more frustrated with it, is, in my opinion, VA really is too big to try and go after one person. I think sometimes it does happen if there's fraud and things like that. There's always exceptions to every rule, but in general, it's just too big. A lot of it is just lack of training, lack of supervision on certain employees, and that's where a lot of these things can come in. So again, some veterans can sleep at night better because they think VA is not honing in on them and coming after them. But that's my biggest takeaway is VA is not trying to come after you. There is a reason for the exam request. Whether we agree with the exam request or not is a different story. But I don't believe VA's, directly honing in on single veterans and saying, ha ha ha, I'm gonna
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna take
catch you in
away
a
your benefit.
lie.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the role of CMP exams when you're applying for total disability based on individual unemployability, TDIU? What's VA going to look for if you're applying for that increased rating based on not being able to work?
Yeah, so that's a good one. When you file for TDIU, which, is that individual unemployability criteria rating, VA is going to either assess or reassess all of your service connected disabilities. And that's very important to know because that means CNP exams. And so, and I know this is not a podcast on TDIU, but I explain TDIU to everyone I know, kind of like a pyramid where TDIU is at the top. And within your pyramid are all of your service connected disabilities, to make up your pyramid. In order to consider TDIU, again, there has to be that reconsideration of everything within your pyramid, even if it's like a 0% wrist or, or tinnitus. We're probably going to go to a CNP exam for each one of those conditions. And what the CNP examiner is supposed to do is they're not supposed to assess, again, they're not supposed to assess what is your current condition. They're supposed to, and I'm emphasizing supposed to for a reason, they're supposed to say, how does this veteran's single condition impact their ability to work? So if we're looking at PTSD, are they able to go to work on time? Are they able to get along with coworkers? Maintain regular hygiene, all the different things. And that's what the examiner is tasked to do. Then, once the examiner does all of their exam requests, then it's going to go to VA, and that VA rating team is supposed to look at the totality of all of those exams and all of your evidence and all of your service connected conditions to determine whether in combination they prevent you from securing and following gainful employment. That's a lot, right? So VA naturally is going to get confused somewhere along the way. So are the CNP examiners. I don't think the exam requests go out as clear as they should. And so sometimes when you file for TDIU, you're going to go to CNP exams and you might not get a great CNP examiner and you might see proposed reductions. And so that's kind of a naturally stemming result from TDIU sometimes. Certainly fight the proposed reduction. Once that goes into effect, then pick up the TDIU piece. But yeah, TDIU is tricky. I always say expect CNP exams. There's gonna be a few. That's normal.
Yeah, I kind of chuckle when VA casts such a wide net and they're looking at stuff. You're like, that's not why the person can't work. It's they're asking for a re-exam of the erectile
Mhm.
dysfunction claim, and you're like, I don't know what kind of work you think this person does, but that's not why we were saying that they can't work. That's just the special
Yeah.
monthly compensation piece. But yeah, I mean, I think we do see a pretty broad net cast for new CMP exams
Mhm.
when you open that up. So people think it's going to be like the easy catch-all to get you over the hump to 100%, but it can just being aware that all the stuff we talked about, preparing for CMP exams, understanding good and bad CMP examiners, or the questions being written confusingly or not, can manifest if you put in that claim for TDIU. Not to say don't do it, but just, you know,
Yeah. Manage
buyer beware.
expectations. Yeah. Know what to expect.
Yeah. We could probably talk CMPs all day long, talk about examples of CMPs. Do you have any final words, anything you want to leave veterans with about understanding the CMP process, or like one thing you wish they knew going into the CMP exam?
Gosh, like you said, I could probably talk about CNP all day. My biggest thing is if you go to a bad CNP exam, don't be discouraged, right? If you go to a CNP exam and the examiner offers their unsolicited or maybe even solicited either medical advice or legal advice or life advice, don't take it as gospel. Get a second opinion. Again, whether you do your research on Reddit, Facebook, va.com, whatever it is, or you seek legal counsel, even a free legal opinion, from our firm or any other firm, just don't let VA discourage you along the way. If you feel strongly about your claim and you know in your heart that it's true and it's linked to service, keep going. There's going to be bad CMPs along the way. There's going to be bad decisions along the way, but that's what we're here for. It's what representatives are here for, to help you, to guide you to success.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, Sarah, and thank you everyone for tuning in. And I think we got into some good topics, but I'm sure we just scratched the surface on some other ones. So if you have more questions, or if this opened up your mind and is raising more questions for you than it's answering, then put those questions in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, guys.